We have some news, as Darren Pang and John Kelly alluded to. Bernie and I will get you all caught up on the recent announcement between the NHLPA and the NHL. They have agreed to postpone cross-border games through December 23rd. What that means for the Blues is that Tuesday at Ottawa and Thursday at Toronto. So the rest of their trip through Canada will be postponed until further notice, Bernie.
And I think probably a really good idea because of, the Christmas holidays now coming up, and of course the guys all want to be with their families. And I think if anybody got stuck and got across the border, you got to quarantine for 14 days. And I don't think anybody wants to stay on the wrong side of the border wherever they live. They want to be at home, and they want to make sure they're going to be home with their families during Christmas. So I think a good idea by not only the NHL but the Players Association to agree to that. So the Blues will be making that trek back from Winnipeg this afternoon right after the game, and anybody else that's in the Canadian teams that are in the United States, they'll have to go back to Canada too. And let's hope that this all gets corrected real quickly. Let's hope that this is just a little problem that everybody's having right now. Let's hope that we can find a way to stop the spread of this COVID, and let's hope that we can get back to just a normal schedule once Christmas is over.
They're going to make a final determination on players going to the Olympics in the coming days. We will keep you updated on that.
With Jeff Merrick, Elliotte, Friedman, 32 Thoughts presented by GMC. Elliotte, you have the floor.
We already had 3 teams that were shut down until Christmas: Calgary, Colorado, and Florida. And now you can add 2 more, as the Boston Bruins and the Nashville Predators shut down through Christmas break. And the Maple Leafs and the Canucks were stopped this weekend, although their additional games before Christmas have not been postponed as of yet. We'll see where this goes, Jeff, but it doesn't look good for Toronto.
No, it does not at all. 17 players, by the way, added to the COVID list today. Philip Zadina, the most recent. 66 players, guys, in the last 72 hours have been added to the list. And yeah, it does indeed start with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So sorry, we'll go to Boston first. Taylor Hall, Curtis Lazar for the Detroit Red Wings, Giovanni Smith, Carter Rowney, Alex Nedeljkovic, and as we just mentioned, Philip Zadina, Arturi Lehkonen of the Habs, PK Subban of the Devils, Max Willman of the Philadelphia Flyers. Meanwhile, out west, Jesse Puljujärvi of the Edmonton Oilers, netminder Cal Peterson of the Kings, Oscar Sundqvist of the St. Louis Blues, and Tyler Myers of the Vancouver Canucks. This has been a tough day for the NHL and a tough day specifically for the Maple Leafs. A couple of defensemen, TJ Brodie, Travis Thurmond, netminder Jack Campbell, head coach Sheldon Keefe, who becomes the 5th head coach in COVID protocol, and Spencer Carberry as well. I want to mention one more thing as well, Ron. NHL officials as well, not exempt as well. The NHL has between 8 to 10 officials on the COVID-19 list right now. They're getting about 5 back.
Dr. Suman Chakrabarty is going to join us on the other side of the break. The NFL's made a decision that if you're double vaxxed and asymptomatic, we won't test you. You can play. So that's a big story for the doctor to think about. And the NHL's kind of gone the other way with increased testing and masks and a lot of different measures, Elliotte. But the one question everyone has is, will they put a halt to the proceeding?
Well, it's been discussed, Ron, and the one thing I want to say is I have a standard line. What I say now might be wrong in 15 minutes. Like, that's how quickly things are changing. But as we sit here and we say this right now, it has been discussed, but it's not guaranteed. I've heard talk about the potential of shutting it down until January 1st and resuming with the Winter Classic. And, there have been some players, Nick Cousins and Jonathan Drouin, have kind of thrown their support behind that idea, and they do have support. But there have been privately a lot of players and teams who said they don't support that. They don't want to do that. And there have been some doctors who've also said, look, there's no guarantee that we're going to be in a better place on January 1st. They want to see where the protocols and testing go before they commit to anything like that at this time. The other concerns, too, are this. If there is a pause, will the players agree not to go to the Olympics? Will the league then say we can't go to the Olympics? Before that is settled, before the pause is settled, I think everybody wants clarity on that. And also, if there is a pause, will players be allowed to travel places over the Christmas break? The league might not want that. So all of these things have to be worked out. But they are asking players to get the booster. I understand one team that has had very high turnout for the booster is Tampa Bay and their American Hockey League team in Syracuse. I think they hope that a lot of people look at that and say if Tampa does it, that because they've been successful, other teams will do it too.
Go ahead, Jeff. Last words.
Yeah, Team Canada women, cuts are on the horizon. We just saw the rivalry series, U.S. and Canada. Marie-Philippe Poulin with all the heroics. Wash, rinse, repeat. Next for Team Canada, a flight to Toronto. 3 cuts Hockey Canada has to make. And here's the big question, Ron. Do they go 14-6 like they did in Pyeongchang, or do they go 13-7? Cuts will be made Tuesday, announced on Wednesday.
Thanks to Jeff Merrick and Elliotte Friedman for his 15 minutes of claim. Dr. Chakrabarty, we will continue the conversation on just a wild day in the pandemic for the NHL on Hockey Night in Canada.
All right, so a lot of things swirling, obviously, with COVID and with the Olympics, Gary. So I guess maybe, in no particular order, if the NHL players don't go, how does that affect things schedule-wise? And, they have this league, they got it blocked out right now for 3 weeks with no games in February.
Yeah, well, so a lot of people are like, well, if they don't go to the Olympics, they can start playing NHL games again. Well, no, the buildings are all booked. Like, Madison Square Garden isn't sitting empty for the month of February because the Rangers are, they're not playing. So I think they will try and look for opportunities because they've postponed so many games already, and there's going to be more. Like, the big worry right now is that there's going to be a league-wide stoppage, that the whole league is going to pause for a while. Don Fehr sent an email to the National Hockey League Players Association, to all the players last night, saying we are going to try and play. We're going to try and avoid a stoppage, but there's no quick fix if the NHL players don't go to the Olympics because of the lack of availability of buildings.
So if the NHL players don't go, how does that kind of play itself out? Who does go to Beijing?
Well, that's really interesting because like every federation had their long list of 50 NHL players or players that were on their short list, and then they had another list of guys that were beyond that were not NHL players. So, for instance, the Spengler Cup is supposed to be played at Christmas time. Canada may withdraw its team from that tournament, but it's like players that play in Europe, some American Hockey League guys, some college players might get the opportunity. But it's becoming more and more curious or worrisome. Will there be anybody to go in terms of hockey because of the situation we're in right now?
Yeah, it hasn't looked particularly good lately. You got, 5 teams that have already shut it down through the holiday break, potentially more to come, and you just have to hope that they can avoid a league-wide pause, as you say.
There's over 115 players in COVID protocol in the National Hockey League right now, and that number has just skyrocketed in the last 5 days. Steve Yzerman came out and said yesterday, none of the guys are sick. Why are we testing? And the NFL has stopped testing players unless they are symptomatic. If you're asymptomatic, you don't get tested in the NFL. They can't do that in the National Hockey League because of the Canadian, the Players Association doctors are Canadian. They have different rules there. They do not want to go to that system.
Yeah, Steve Yzerman, though, makes a real good point.
Man Chakrabarty is infectious diseases at Trillium in Mississauga and a dedicated Montreal Canadiens fan. So, Suman, obviously, you know your hockey. A lot of the players will be listening to you right now. A lot of our viewers. What would you say to them?
Yeah, listen, I know it's been a tough couple of months, and what's happening in hockey is actually very analogous to what's happening in the healthcare system, with lots of people testing positive with this Omicron variant. And it can be troublesome with all these tests. What do you do with isolation? On one hand, we want to be safe, but on the other hand, we have an operation, and you can have a lot of people that aren't able to work. And this might need to be changed a little bit with Omicron, especially given that it has different characteristics than the previous variants.
Okay, so that sounds like you're opening the door a little bit to the NFL approach. Do you follow what I'm saying? The NFL has said if you're double vaxxed and asymptomatic, we won't test you. You can play. You're good with that?
I'm good with that at one point. I think right now it's too early. I think that we're in the middle of an exponential spread here with Omicron. So we need to keep an eye on the cases, especially in these congregate settings, like a hockey team, so we can cut those chains of transmission. But at some point, these minor cases, especially when this becomes an endemic virus, one that's just circulating like the flu does, we don't need to know about every cough and cold and runny nose. And in that situation, we wouldn't be testing people who are asymptomatic. So that is something that is coming in the future, just a bit too early right now.
It's almost like a conflict of two silos of health. One is your mental and one is your physical. So how much conversation are you having internally with your peers about just that?
A lot, Ron. This has been a really, really trying time for all of us in the past 2 years. And I think one of the big things that we're seeing is the pressure and the sheer weight of these lockdowns, just having something always hanging over you. And the mental health has really suffered for this in our kids, in adults, everybody. So I think it's something definitely that's considered with any policy.
Just about Omicron, what can you tell us in terms of this notion that you've already mentioned that for the time being you don't have enough evidence, but there is this feeling that it's more like the common cold or the common flu. What would you say to that?
It would be nice if that were the case. And there is evidence that's mounting from South Africa, but also UK, Denmark now, that it may be just that. But just given the situation we're in, we want to wait till we have some more solid evidence before we go the extra mile. But yes, if this is something that's very transmissible, but extremely mild, it's something that'll make all of us who are exposed immune, and that will really, really put the brakes on this pandemic. So here's to hoping, but right now we're not quite there yet. So we still have to do a little bit more vigilance.
And in that same vein, it becomes the dominant variant. In other words, Delta, which was far more lethal. Again, notwithstanding the fact we don't have enough evidence to make that declaration, but let's assume it's that Delta's the more lethal strain. Can this one somehow supersede it and become the dominant strain, and that kind of gets us out of the woods?
Absolutely. So if that's the case, we thought that Delta would be the final one, but Delta was quite powerful itself. But Omicron has quite a competitive advantage against it and has been able to crowd it out. And if this is something that's able to crowd Delta out very effectively, and it ends up being mild, this would be a blessing in disguise. So, again, the needle's kind of pointing in that direction. We're not completely sure yet, but if we get there, that would be a very, very good thing. Time will tell.
Meantime, getting your vaccine or your booster, where are you on in terms of what we should be doing?
Yeah, I think that this is our best defense that we have against the virus is immunity. And, we've been pretty successful here in Canada with the vaccine campaign. What I would say is for the booster, I want to especially target people who are over the age of about 50 to 60, immune compromising conditions, and those who live in long-term care. Everyone is going to be eligible over 18, but those are the target populations you really, really want to get to really help to curb illness. And otherwise, we know that the vaccine works really well, and it looks to work against Omicron as well. So if you haven't gotten vaccinated yet, I urge you to do so.
Dr. Chakrabarty, it's like bedside manner that you're doing on TV all the time. We so appreciate it. Thank you for this.
Thanks, Ron.
Dr. Suman Chakrabarty, infectious diseases physician at Trillium in Mississauga.